Hello and welcome back to Josh Plays 40k for another painting tutorial. This time we are going to be painting the Necron Starstele from the Convergence of Dominion box. You get 3 of these great models in this box, so they are good fun to paint. They have slightly different designs to them. I've chosen the sort of middle model between a good mix of the stone outer wall and the sort of metal interior, so that you get a good look at both. But either model actually is sort of one end of each of those scales. One of them is completely covered in stone and the other one has barely any at all. So all these techniques can be used on all 3 models. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. So the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously prime your model in Chaos Black. And then as you'll see here, the first sort of colour we're getting on is that silver, which I'm doing with a very sort of quite heavy dry brush of Iron Hand Steel. You can work your way around all the metal. You don't have to be too neat and tidy with it. You will want a couple of different size brushes. Obviously at the moment I'm using quite a large dry brush for getting all the big panel work and bits and pieces like that, and you can just work around and be quite liberal with it and make sure you get a nice coverage. And then as you'll see here, I'm using a smaller brush now to get in those interior metal parts between the cracks of the stone walls, so that you can still get that shine out. And so work your way around sort of all the model with that, and obviously make sure you're happy with how the metal is. Once you've done that first metal highlighter with Iron Hand Steel, you can move on to Lead Belcher and just go over that metal work again, not quite so heavily as before. This is just about a little bit of different tones of metal to it. You won't necessarily see it quite so prominently on the model, but it does help just shade some of those in to make it a little bit better. So obviously again, just work your way around. After that, we then move on to the green. So the first one you'll want is Warpstone Glow, and depending on which style steel you're working on, you may want quite a small brush or a larger one may do, but you're looking at getting all the little sort of vents in that middle section there to do it, along with the sort of orbs and bits around the model. So you will probably find that you'll want 2, maybe 3 coats, depending on how thin you make your paint, to go onto the model. I certainly had 2 go on here for the middle sections and for the orbs themselves. As you'll see, it's not too time consuming to go around. Obviously try and be neat on the metal work if you can, because obviously it can be a little bit tricky to neaten up a dry brush with a normal painting technique afterwards. So do try and be as neat as you can with this. As you can see, I'm using quite a small and narrow brush. The Warpstone Glow offers a nice sort of base coat for when we get to the lighter greens later on, and the actual glowing effect of the energy that's pulsating from these old Necron relics. Once you're happy with how that green is looking, we can then move on to starting on the stonework itself. So the paint you're going to want is Incubi Darkness, and you're going to find that it'll definitely take 2 coats to go over the black on this to get a nice full colour, and obviously if there's any sort of metal tone showing from when we did the dry brush. So but you'll just want to take your time and go around all of the stone. As I say, some of them have a bit more than others, particularly the one that's completely covered in it. That will take a bit more time, and this is probably the lengthiest process that I incurred when painting these. And you'll also want to remember, particularly for this middle one, there's 2 little nodes that come, and I tend to find that it was easier to paint these separately, so that you could get the metalwork and the orbs particularly a lot better with them, and then just pop them on afterwards. But yeah, don't forget to obviously coat those in the Incubi Darkness as well. After that's all done and you're happy with how that's blocked in, we can move on to shading the model. So again, none oil is the shade you'll be looking for, and this is just for the stone effect, not for the metal, because obviously that's already got the tone that we're looking for, but just work your way around all of the stone. You don't want it to be too thick and pooly. It is really just to offer some darkness back into that, so that when we dry brush the highlights on, it does stand out a lot more. And it helps go into the grooves of that sort of Necron lettering that's on there, and help that stand out later on. So obviously just take your time to go round, obviously mop up any excess with your brush that you're not happy with. Obviously naturally will start to move towards the bottom if there's too much on the brush. But as you can see, this step isn't too time consuming. And obviously not forgetting as well the little pieces of stone that were afterwards, and obviously any stone that is on the base of the model as well. After that's done and dried, you can move on to the very first highlight of that stone, and we're going to be using Cabalite Green. Now again, this is quite a sort of heavy dry brush in a way, just to obviously lighten up the Incubi Darkness after the shading, but you're just sort of looking to do a nice sort of circle technique over the stone, and get that covered a little bit more, just so that it's got starting off with a nice sort of green glowing effect that's coming to that. Again, the sort of effect I go for with the stone is to make it look a little bit like Blackstone. If you've ever painted the Illuminor Saraz model, he has a very small sort of circle piece of Blackstone on his carapace, which I did with exactly the same techniques as this one, and I was quite happy with how it came out. So when I got these, I decided to go for the same technique. Once you've done that first Cabalite green dry brush, the next one we're looking for is a much more sort of delicate highlighting dry brush, and we're going to be using the actual dry paint Hellion Green, and that gives a nice sort of starting off. It's not too strong, it's quite a pale green, but again gives a nice sort of glowing and sort of distressed look to the stone that we're going for. But you're really just looking to pick out the edges of this. You can come into the centre of the stone just a little bit. As you can see, I was a bit heavy there, but you can work your way around and just pick up those edges. You can see it really does stick to the model quite nicely. I should also point that you probably want to use quite a small dry brush for this. You don't really want to be looking at anything too big. As you can see, I'm using the Army Painter dry brushes. This is the smaller one of the pack of 3 that they do. For the Cabalite Green, I was using the medium-sized one. I haven't yet used the largest one. I think that's really more aimed at sort of larger terrain pieces. So buildings, for example, when you're doing sort of more heavy coverage. Obviously, don't forget with the Hellion Green to do the bases of that, and also the little sort of broken pieces of stone that we'll be putting on later. And then just as a final highlight to the stonework, you'll be looking at using the dry paint again, Paraxi White. This is a very soft highlight, as you can see, just to catch the edges of the broken stone and any sort of gaps and lips between the stones. It's not something I'm going around every single part to do. It's just where you think the light might catch it the most and will look a little bit better from having a more of a glowing gleam from the stone effect rather than the green. But obviously how much you wish to apply is personal choice. I have gone slightly more delicately than heavy. I quite like the Hellion Green effect as well. After you're happy with that, we'll then move back to the orbs and power systems of the model. And for that, we'll be looking at Moot Green. You'll be working your way around all these little sort of energy pylons that we originally base coated in Warpstone Glow, and just work your way around each and every one and coat them off. You'll probably find, a bit like with the Warpstone Glow, this will take at least 2 coats. I must admit, I believe that you'll be looking at probably 3, and this one did take me 3 coats. There was out of the 3 Starsteles I painted, there was only one that I did only do in 2 coats. But it will give you a nice, rich colour for when we then move on to the dry brushing of the energy itself. But take your time and work your way around the model and catch all those details. Now, what with the top one here, what you'll see I'm doing is I'm not going quite all the way to the edges or the bottom, just to leave a little bit of that darker green in the recesses so that it does stand out, and that way it will also make the glow a lot more prominent when you're finished with the model. And obviously not forgetting the little orbs at the bottom here, particularly the large one in the middle. That is where where it will need the most coats. The smaller ones are usually okay with 2, but that middle one there is usually 3 coats to get a lovely smooth finish. Now, after you've done that, we'll work on the glowing effect for all the metal now. So to show that energy really is pulsating and it is radiating over the metal itself. So that what you'll be looking at is Moot Green again. And it's quite a heavy dry brush over this metal, as you can see. And you just want to sort of coat over that middle pylon and bits down there, so it can really look like it's coming out. I also do the centre part of this metal here just a little bit more lightly, just to show that middle orb is really pushing out some light and glowing. And obviously you want to do both sides of the Starsteles that you do. I have also caught just the very edges of the stonework around the centrepiece, as you can see, and that is just to show that it is obviously glowing over the top of that, and again obviously with the metalwork. After that, it'll be a little bit more of a conservative dry brush, just looking at the centre parts. Now this is actually a mix of moot green and Flashgit's yellow. The reason you'll want that is so that it is a little bit more of a glow than the moot green. You're looking at 2 parts yellow to 1 part green, and you just want to make sure you mix it nicely together. And this, as I say, is a very light dry brush. And then very finally we'll do a edge highlight of nice bright Stormhost silver, so that you can obviously get the most out of the metalwork. It is just to catch the highest edges, as you can see, so that it's all nice and put together, and any raised details that you might wish to stand out. And there we have it, all finished, the finished Starstele. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and it has been helpful, and you can then obviously paint up your own 3 models and enjoy them on the tabletop. If you did like the video, please leave a like or a comment and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, by all means pop them in the comments and I will we'll come back to you. But otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Thank you.